their neighborhood from a hurricane, 36 hours straight pulling families from floodwater. No sleep, soaked barely alive. Our two fake HOA enforcers tried to impound a patrol car without realizing it belonged to the police captain who was standing right in front of them. They handed out forged citations, threatened neighbors, and ran a scam on the most vulnerable. But Captain Mark Redding had a badge, a body cam, and backup coming in under 3 minutes. And just wait until you hear how fast their whole operation unraveled and why justice hit harder than they ever expected. The morning had started like any other. Captain Mark Redding stepped onto his driveway in pressed uniform, badge gleaming on his chest, cradling a stainless steel travel mug still warm with coffee. The sun was low, casting gold across the quiet cul-de-sac. His street was the kind where neighbors waved, lawn sprinklers hissed, and the biggest scandal last month was a missing recycling bin. But today, something felt off. Two men were standing beside his unmarked patrol vehicle, a black Ford Interceptor parked nose first in the driveway. One was scribbling on a clipboard. The other stood with arms crossed, wearing a faded tactical belt and mirrored aviators that hadn't seen real service in years. Mark paused mid-zip. There were no visible names, no county ID, no municipal vehicle, just a rusted pickup idling across the street, its side doors covered with cheap magnetic signs that read HOA Enforcement Authority Special Division. He approached slowly, eyes narrowing. Can I help you, gentlemen? The older man didn't look up. You were in violation of HOA Regulation 17E Prohibited Vehicle Class, he said flatly. This unit's being impounded. You'll need to appeal with the compliance tribunal if you want to contest. Mark blinked. Compliance what? Tribunal, the man repeated, flipping to a second sheet. You're authorized to seize non-conforming vehicles left in open view. Mark steps between them and his cruiser. That's a government-issued police car, he said calmly, registered to the county, and I'm the officer who drives it. The man with the aviators let out a small snort. You don't get special treatment just because you're a cop. No one's above HOA law. Mark studied them closely. The security vest was off-brand. The documents looked homemade. No body, no marked equipment, no citations logged through the county system. Just a pair of clipboards and the kind of confidence that made his instincts tighten. And yet they stood there, still, utterly sure of themselves, as if they'd done this before. You were about 5 steps away from committing a felony, Mark said, his voice low and precise. Neither man flinched. The interceptor sat behind them, clean, fully compliant, license plate visible, the antenna array tucked against the windshield. And yet, these two nobodies were acting like they had jurisdiction. They were human. That's when Mark's pulse changed. Not out of fear, but from the quiet realization that this wasn't just overreach. It was something deeper, something attractive, something they thought they could get away with. We needed a home. We built it up. Mark let them talk. Every phrase, every quick silence, every single. They were etching themselves into his memory. His training took over. Assess, observe, don't escalate too fast. But inside, the slow burn had already started. When he asked for identification, they offered a flimsy piece of paper, inkjet printed, folded into a seal that looked like it had been copied from a clipboard. At the bottom was a typed signature, Deputy Compliance Chief. Mark had worked with HOAs before. He knew their structure inside and out. There was no such title in any official registry, let alone one with legal power to impound vehicles, let alone police cruisers. The document was laughably fraudulent, but these men weren't laughing. One of them walked around the back of his car, unwrapping the boot as he was issuing a parking citation to the college teacher. The other pulled a carbon-copy poster from his clipboard and began scribbling. That's when Mark, without missing a beat, tapped the small mic, clipped to the underside of his lapel. Unit 14, he said softly. Possible 148 impersonation. Requesting background check on 2 males claiming 8.
Give me 1 second, y'all. Power on. The Bluetooth device is ready to pair. The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
One justice hit harder than they ever expected. The morning had started like any other. Captain Mark Redding stepped onto his driveway in pressed uniform, badge gleaming on his chest, cradling a stainless steel travel. His unmarked patrol vehicle. Prohibited vehicle class. The security vest was off-brand. The documents looked homemade. No body cams, no mark
I don't know
equipment,
what happened.
no
I think he
citations
glitched.
logged through. Neither man flinched. The interceptor sat behind him, clean, fully compliant, license plates visible, the antenna array tucked against the windshield. And yet, these two nobodies were acting like they had jurisdiction over him. That's when Mark pulse changed. Not out of fear, but from the quiet realization that this wasn't just overreach. It was something deeper, something practiced, something they thought they could get away with. They hadn't, until today. Mark let them talk. Every phrase, every fake title, every smug inflection, they were etching themselves into his memory. His training took over. Assess, observe, don't escalate too fast. But inside, a slow burn had already started. When he asked for identification, they offered a flimsy piece of paper, inkjet printed, folded unevenly, and stamped with a seal that looked like it had been copied from clip art. At the bottom was a typed signature, Deputy Compliance Chief. Mark had worked with HOAs before. He knew their structure inside and out. There was no such title in any official register, let alone one with legal power to impound vehicles, let alone police cruisers. The document was laughably fraudulent, but these men weren't laughing. One of them walked around the back of his car, unwrapping a boot like he was issuing a parking citation for college students. The other pulled a carbon-copied coat slip from his clipboard and began scribbling. That's when Mark, without missing a beat, tapped the small mic, clipped to the underside of his lapel. Unit 14, he said softly. Possible 148 impersonation. Requesting background check on 2 males claiming HOA authority. Stand by for description. A faint crackle came back. Copy that. We're pulling HOA enforcement rosters now. Proceed with caution. Mark didn't respond. He didn't need to. He already knew what distance would find. Nothing. Because these two weren't on any list. They weren't affiliated with any HOA enforcement group licensed in the county. They were operating from the shadows, preying on assumptions in silence. And then a voice came from the side. Mark? A whisper. He turned. Across the hedge, peeking through tilted blinds, was his next-door neighbor. A retired school counselor, known for baking banana bread for every new resident. He leaned out just enough to speak. We tried the same thing with my husband's truck last week, he nodded. Whatever that means. He parked it 1 inch over the crack in the driveway. They said it had to go. He works for FEMA, for heaven's sake. Mark clenched his jaw. These weren't one-off conflicts. They were organized. They were methodical. And they were targeting something or wouldn't fight back. Elderly neighbors, busy parents, civil servants, people who trusted that if someone showed up with a clipboard and enough boldness, they must be telling the truth. But today they picked the wrong driveway. Mark looked at the rusted truck across the street again. The faded decals, the absence of official plates, the magnetic signs curling at the corners. He looked back at the 2 men, confident, unaware they were standing inches from the window. They weren't just impersonating soldiers, they were weapons. And now, they were trying to seize county property from the uniformed officer in broad daylight. Mark's hand hovered near his belt, not out of fear, but as a reflex. He wasn't thinking just about his car anymore. He was thinking about everyone these men had threatened before they showed up at his door. They thought no one would question them, that no one would push back. But they hadn't met Captain Mark Redding. Mark didn't raise his voice. The 2 imposters and his patrol vehicle, He gave a single, clear instruction. Step back, now. They didn't move. The one with the sunglasses snorted. The other, clipboard still in hand, tried to wave them off. We don't take orders from residents. This is a compliance action. You are interfering with official. Mark's thumb was already on the radio. Dispatch, Unit 14, Code 37 in progress. Suspected vehicle fraud, impersonation of enforcement. Two individuals requesting immediate response. There was no hesitation on the other end. Copy. Units en route. ETA under 3. Mark didn't break eye contact. The silence stretched a few seconds longer, just long enough for the tension to thicken, like a storm front. Then came the distant wail of sirens, faint at first, then growing fast, and then fierce. One had been cocky before, stepped back. This is all a misunderstanding, he said, his voice cracking in sudden uncertainty. We were just issuing a notice. It's not personal. He glanced around as if calculating how fast he could get to the truck idling nearby. The other, desperate now, dropped to one knee and started yanking at the boot they had just locked onto Mark's cruiser, fumbling to release it. Two black and white units rolled up, fast and clean. County sheriff vehicle, engines humming low, lights pulsing red and blue across the neatly trimmed lawns. Doors open, deputies stepped out fast, hands near their belts, expressions hard. Body cams were rolling. Hands where we can see them, one deputy barked. The younger man reached for his vest, no weapon, just a gesture. But it was enough. The deputy's sidearm cleared its holster and a heartbeat. Do not move, down on your knees, now. They froze. Mark remained still, watching them with an expression colder than anger, disappointment, mixed with steel. He reached inside his jacket, pulled out his credentials, and stepped forward just enough for the deputies to see. Captain Mark Reginald, County Police, under fraudulent HOA authority. One of the deputies gave a tight nod and began reading rights. The scammers were wide-eyed, sweating, muttering again about paperwork and policy misunderstandings. But the words didn't mean anything anymore. Mark looked directly at the one still kneeling beside the boot. You impersonated officers. You trespassed on private property. You tried to intimidate a federal employee last week. And today, you targeted me. He paused. And you tried to seize a government vehicle. He leaned in slightly, not a threat, not a boast, just the truth, delivered with the force of someone who had seen this kind of corruption before and never let it stand. You've got regrets, he said quietly. The aftermath came swiftly. Within 48 hours, the full picture came into focus. The man, calling himself Deputy Compliance Chief Hank, was identified as Harold K. Simmons, a former HOA board president removed 2 years prior after a series of budget irregularities and a quietly dropped civil suit over falsified citations. He resurfaced with a new angle: fake enforcement, homemade violations, and scare tactics aimed at the most trusting members of the community. His accomplice, Daniel Reed, had no municipal credentials, just a background in door-to-door sales and a history of small claims, court disputes. Together, they built a phony enforcement front using nothing more than clipboards, magnetic decals, and a fabricated online compliance tribunal that collected fake payment processing fees for non-existent clients. Mark's body cam footage, calm, professional, undeniable, was reviewed and sealed into evidence. But a short clip showing the moment the imposters were confronted went viral after it occurred. Now the sheriff's department released it to warn other neighborhoods. Local news anchors ran the story under bold banners. State HOA cops tried to boot patrol car, arrested by real captain. By the end of the week, every legitimate HOA in the county had issued public statements condemning the scam and assuring residents that neither Simmons nor Reese had ever been authorized to act on their behalf. Some even launched their own internal reviews to ensure nothing similar could happen again. For Mark's neighborhood, the closure came in a quiet event. That Sunday, folding tables lined the cul-de-sac. Neighbors brought casserole dishes and lemonade. Kids ran under string lights. And at the center, a folding chair was left empty until Shelley called Mark over, insisting he sit down. A printed sign hung behind the table. Neighborhood watch captain. For real. Mark smiled and sat. Not because he needed the recognition, but because he knew it meant something had shifted. People weren't just grateful, they were empowered. Meanwhile, at the county level, the exposure led to something bigger. After reviewing Mark's handling of the case and uncovering connections between similar scams in neighboring districts, the sheriff's office formed a new task force dedicated to HOA-related fraud, headed by Captain Mark Lake. 1 month later, in court, Simmons made a formal plea for leniency, citing a misunderstanding and no malicious intent. The judge didn't even blink. "You tried to tow a police captain's patrol car," she said. "You're lucky you weren't met by a SWAT team." The courtroom fell quiet, and outside the courthouse, as Mark walked back to his car, he passed a row of real officers, ungrateful neighbors. He gave a polite nod, opened the door, and drove off, sirens off, badge intact, and justice fully delivered. Iowa President Karen demanded the key to Drew Latham's private gun locker, threatening fines and public shaming when he refused. She paraded around with fake authority, stirring fear and labeling him a danger to the communities. But what she didn't know, Drew writes the very firearms laws she tried to twist. Just wait until you see how this quiet expert turns the table, and why justice, in the end, spoke louder than her clipboard. It was barely past 8 a.m. when Drew Latham heard the crunch of shoes on his gravel path. He glanced up from his Adirondack chair, the steam coffee curling into the crisp Tennessee morning. The neighborhood was still half asleep. Birdsong, a light breeze, the soft clink of ceramic against his wedding ring. Everything was still until it appeared. Karen Muncie marched up his porch steps like she owned them. She wore her self-issued HOA folder and carried a clipboard in her hand. Flanking her were 2 volunteers from the newly formed Neighborhood Safety League. One of them was the other a teenager trying too hard to look official in a vest 2 sizes too big. "Mr. Brinkley," Karen began, skipping a greeting. Her tone was clipped. Due to recent safety concerns, the HOA will now require access to all privately held firearms and gun safes for compliance inspection. Drew didn't move. His mug stopped midair. For a beat, it was just him, the mug, and the weight of what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry. What?" he asked quietly, lowering the cup. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness behind it now. Not anger, yet. It was waking up beneath the surface. Karen took a step closer, clipboard held high with them. "You'll submit the key to your gun locker by end of day. This is a mandatory safety measure. Non-compliance will result in a fine." $500 fine per day, and if needed, the HOA reserves the right to forcibly remove any non-regulated lock. She said it like she believed it, like she was quoting law. She wasn't. She didn't have the law better than most. She studied the things. No sarcasm, no sex ed, no stealth, unearned confidence that came from winning a vote and punching power. Karen had always been pushy, but this wasn't petty politics about the fence height or mailbox color. This was something else entirely. Drew felt the quiet crackle of disbelief settle into his chest. She was serious. What Karen didn't know, what she hadn't bothered to learn, was that Drew Latham wasn't just another homeowner with a safe in his garage. He was the architect of the very firearms privacy laws she was trying to trample. He testified in courtrooms, rewritten policy briefs, and debated federal compliance standards in D.C. And now, some HOA president with a badge from a printer shop was standing on his porch, demanding access to his personal property. "Where exactly," he asked slowly, "do you believe the HOA gets that authority?" Karen blinked, but only for a second. In the community vote last week, Section 9C, Public Risk Threat Assessment, we approved mandatory compliance measures for dangerous assets. It didn't. She'd buried it. She'd slid something into the meeting notes, likely labeled it as a safety precaution, and pushed it through during one of those meetings no one bothered attending. Deliberate symbol. Drew didn't. He didn't argue. He simply nodded once and closed the front door, quietly. Not in anger, but in preparation. Because this wasn't overreach anymore. This was war. Karen didn't retreat after Drew shut the door. In fact, it seemed to energize her. By Sunday afternoon, a mass email went out to the entire Lakewood Bluffs neighborhood. The subject line read, "Urgent, non-compliant gun owner alert." Drew's full name was listed in bold. The body of the email made no direct accusation, but was carefully worded to stir suspicion. While most of our community has chosen to cooperate with the Safety Inspection Initiative, it read, Mr. Drew Latham continues to withhold access to potentially dangerous equipment. We encourage neighbors to stay informed and remain vigilant. The implication was clear and poisonous. By Monday morning, flyers with Drew's photo and a grainy image of a gun locker were taped to mailboxes, telephone poles, and even slipped under doors. One had been taped directly to his mailbox. Across the top, in bold red letters, "Do you know what's in your neighbor's house?" Drew stood at the curb holding the flyer with one hand and his morning paper in the other. The quiet of his porch now felt different, uneasy, watched. On Wednesday, it escalated. As he stepped outside to get the mail, he saw her. Karen stood at the foot of his driveway with a microphone in her hand and a man beside her holding a local news station camera. She had her HOA polo on, her face badge catching the sun. "I have a responsibility to protect our children," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And Mr. Latham's refusal to cooperate with a simple safety request tells you everything you need to know. She angled her body slightly toward the camera, making sure the logo on her clipboard surface was visible. Drew didn't finish. He turned without a word and walked back inside. Something was shifting now. Not just in him, but in the neighborhood. Others were being targeted. Across the street, Dave Miller, a retired Army sergeant, got the same notice from Karen. Then the Petersons, avid hunters who had a secured weapons cabinet and had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. The requests were no longer voluntary. They were demands. And Karen, she doubled down. She used HOA funds to hire a private security contractor called Eagles Shield, a third-rate firm with matching uniforms and no legal authority. They began patrolling in pairs, knocking on doors, clipboard in hand, taking photos of homes that hadn't complied. They became Operation Clear View. Then came the tipping point. A soft-spoken elderly gentleman, Walt Pink, who had served 2 tours overseas and walked with a cane, refused to let the security detail inside his home. The next day, his front door was damaged. The story was fuzzy. Karen claimed he panicked and slammed the door, but neighbors whispered something else entirely. Drew's blood ran hot. This wasn't fear-mongering. It was coercion, parading as policy. Karen was playing government. She had no law, no warrant, no accountability. Just a badge she printed at an office supply store and a hunger for control. He didn't know the documents she was violating had been authored by the man he was targeting. That Drew wasn't just an advisor. He was the one who drafted the measures for the state's firearms safe storage and privacy. He knew every clause, every loophole, every court case that had survived. And what Karen really didn't know, the Deputy Attorney General of Tennessee, Greg Sullivan, had been Drew's college roommate, best man at his wedding, and fishing partner just last month. She thought she was taking down a quiet neighbor, who was in fact poking the man who helped write the rules. And the rules didn't favor her. Drew never raised his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't post on social media or threaten legal action in the HOA group chat, like some residents had begun doing. He simply began to push. Every email Karen had sent with his name, every flyer, every video clip of her statements. especially the one where she publicly accused him of hiding dangerous assets. Every recorded encounter where her so-called security officers stepped past property, made cumulative threats, or claimed authority they didn't legally possess. Every quote, every policy difference, every bullet ball. He knew what he was doing. The binder he built over the next 3 days was thick, sectioned, and color tab, facelift, state codes, HOA charter violations, a printed copy of the Firearms Safe Storage and Privacy Act, with the annotations, and a detailed letter addressed to the Office of the Attorney General, outlining civil liberties violations, abuse of authority, and impersonation of law enforcement. On Thursday morning, Drew placed the binder in the passenger seat of his car and drove to Nashville. The moment it landed on the desk of the Deputy Attorney General, Greg Sullivan, it all began. Within 48 hours, cease and desist letters were issued to every member of the Lakewood Bluffs HOA board, legally binding, signed by the Attorney General himself. The very next day, Eagle Shield Security was pulled off patrol by county law enforcement. Their operating license, Drew had learned, was already under review for misconduct in another subdivision. Their insurance coverage, invalid, because impersonating any form of law enforcement voided their bond. Karen's hired officers were now, legally speaking, just trespassers in matching shirts, but the damage was pays general insurance, essential for operating legally, was suspended after Drew filed a formal complaint outlining multiple breaches of contract, including unlawful entry, libel against residents, and negligence. The HOA couldn't enforce any policy. Then came the final moment. A mandatory emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled, broadcast on public access television, per state regulations. The board had no choice but to allow Drew to speak, having publicly named him in past notices. He walked in wearing the gray button-down shirt and slacks. No president, and a leather folder under one. When the board president asked him to state his position as a concerned resident, Drew stood up, opened the folder, and placed something on the table in front of him. His badge. Policy Director, Office of Legislative Counsel, State of Tennessee. The room went still. Karen, seated across from him, froze. Her face lost its color. Drew said only one sentence. I don't think you understood the laws you were playing with. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Karen Muncie officially resigned from her post as HOA president just 2 weeks after the cease and desist orders landed. The board cited irreparable breaches of resident trust and held a closed-door vote that quietly dissolved the so-called Neighborhood Safety Committee. The decision wasn't debated. It wasn't delayed. No one wanted to be caught defending what had happened. A formal apology letter signed by every remaining board member was mailed to each household in Lakewood Bluffs. It acknowledged the overreach, the unlawful enforcement attempts, specifically addressed the false accusations made against Drew.
Have you heard about drop-in bathrooms? This company is looking for homeowners to trial these brand new, super easy to install drop-in bathrooms. Get this.
13 mailboxes destroyed in 1 month. You heard that right, and my security cameras captured it all. 2 Karen sisters in a black SUV, blonde hair whipping out the windows, cackling like hyenas every time my mailbox got crushed like a soda can. The HOA president and her sister, the ones who've been keeping me awake all summer, acted like they were playing some twisted game of cat and mouse on my prop.
I pulled into my driveway after a 3-day weekend. The last thing I expected was a seizure notice plastered across my front door, printed in Comic Sans, and signed with a sparkly gel pen. It was stuck taped over the peephole like a deranged craft project gone rogue. The notice claimed I owed $11,670 in homeowners association fine, and had 24 hours to vacate or case asset reclamation. As if my Kingston farmhouse were a clearance rack TV at Best Buy. I stood there, coffee in hand, wondering if I'd stumbled into a sitcom parody of my own life. When I heard an unmistakable slap of flip-flops on gravel. William Montgomery, self-proclaimed empress of the Whispering Pines HOA, was marching toward my porch with a posse of footboard-wielding devotees, like she was storming a fortress, and I was the last holdout. Mister, Brennan, Sheila's voice cut through the air like a knife through butter. You're in violation of 27 HOA statutes. Vacate by 7 p.m. She gestured theatrically to her sun hat-clad followers, who nodded with eerie synchronicity. I blinked, still clutching my coffee. Sheila, I said, slow and deliberate, I'm not in your HOA. Never have been. My house is on Cedar Hollow, half a mile north of Whispering Pines. She flashed a condescending smile. There's been a jurisdictional realignment, she declared. My property was annexed last month. Paperwork's filed, approved, and we celebrated with lemon bars. Annexed? This wasn't an undeniable land grab. I challenged her, pointing out you can't just absorb someone's property like it's a board game. She produced a folder stuffed with what looked like legal Zoom printouts and clip art seals. Your garden violates Section 8. Your mailbox is an unapproved shade of beige. And I've had complaints about your wind chimes being unharmonious. Unharmonious? I never laughed, but the panic soon believed my confusion was real. Sheila wasn't playing pretend. She was deadly serious. And unless I unraveled her scheme fast, I risked losing my home to a woman whose last legal victory was a lawsuit against the bakery for insufficiently gluten-free scones. I gave her 10 seconds to leave, or I'd call the sheriff. She grinned like she'd been waiting for the threat. Already called. You're trespassing on HOA land. 20 minutes later, Deputy Larson arrived, his mustache thick enough to smuggle secrets. Sheila spoke lean, sighed, and muttered, You again, Sheila? Turning to me, he said, Mind if I step inside? Over coffee, I showed him my title document, subdivision map, and county plat proving my house stood firmly outside Whispering Pines. He whistled. This is going to be a mess. He filed something at the assessor's office last week. I'll look at it. While Larson handled the legal sarcasm, spreadsheets, and icy cough, I called my friend Laura, a real estate lawyer, who burst into laughter so hard she choked on her latte when she saw Sheila's annexation packet. It was a farce. There were signatures, misspelled names, no notary stamps, and a sign-off from a Judge Harold Von Hammer, who Google revealed was a mascot for a Nebraska law school. But Sheila wasn't backing down. She escalated, planting signs in my yard proclaiming future site of HOA Serenity Garden and distributing flyers claiming my house would soon be a community asset.
Her Majesty just informed me tonight's sleepover theme was princesses and waffles.
Be a community asset. One night, I came home to find 3 HOA unions in polo shirts erecting a flagpole on my lawn. That's when I decided, if Sheila wanted a war, I'd give her one she couldn't comprehend. I dove into Sheila's world, not just her HOA antics, but her finances. She owned her gaudy mansion via a maxed-out variable rate mortgage from a shaky local bank, First Horizon Trust, which was bleeding cash and desperate for investors. Sheila was also in default on 2 HOA Projexa Box Community Fountain in a Zen rock garden that became a mosquito breeding ground, sparking lawsuits. That's when the idea hit. While Sheila was spray painting reserved for HOA president on my driveway, I was on a Zoom call with a business partner, demonstrating the quiet purchase of First Horizon's debt portfolio Sheila's mortgage included. She wanted to seize my house. I'd seize her financial lifeline and her sanity. Sheila doubled down, taking laminated community guidelines in my flower bed, listing rules like all decor must radiate tranquility and no whistling after dusk. I read them with a rake in one hand, debating whether to laugh or dig them up. Laura confirmed Sheila's annexation was pure fiction. Her voter list included a fluffy McWhiskers for Tabby Cat, with a proper signature matching that record. The problem? Sheila's fake filings had gummed up the county recorder's office, creating a temporary limbo that let her act like her lien was law. She even demanded I repaint my house, Serenity was 3, or pay a $750 fine. I responded by taking photos of a green ogre in every window, captioning my home, my swamp. My real life were quieter. First Horizon was drowning, and my partner Sam and I offered to buy their toxic mortgage bundle, including Sheila's, working as a routine acquisition. Secured full servicing rights, meaning I couldn't force her loan terms to meet the loan payments, or foreclose if she defaulted. Simultaneously, we flagged Sheila's HOA filings for legal review, raising red flags with the bank's compliance. Meanwhile, Sheila went full autocrat, hosting a mandatory HOA orientation barbecue in my backyard. I came home with folding chairs, a bouncy castle, and strangers sticking me tags on my neighbors. When I demanded statement, Sheila yelled from behind a grill. Firm bylaws. Spaces are shared. I waited for 5 minutes before I turned on the garden hose. This went like startled ants. Sheila drenched, clutched her soggy cookies, and screamed about newsletter exposure. Her next program was a township council meeting. Sheila, sporting a community visionary sash, pitched her expanded HOA to secure grant, passing out maps claiming my property as hers. I waited until her slideshow peaked, then asked, how does an HOA with no legal charter or state filings claim grant eligibility for properties outside its plat? The room froze. Laura stood, holding a folder of evidence, and calmly noted Sheila's forged seals, fake voters, and cat signatures. The council erupted. Sheila stammered about a spiritually injured notary before being silenced. Her filings were slated for review, and her credibility crumbled. By then, my acquisition of First Horizon's portfolio was complete. Sheila's $400,000 mortgage, tied to a house Zillow valued at $350,000 on a good day, was mine to control. Her loan had a balloon clause 1 year for maturity. With no sign she prepared for the massive payment. I sent her a certified letter, sent a breach of mortgage terms in the upcoming balloon. Settle the balance in 30 days or face foreclosure. She received it, sprinting across her lawn in flippers, reading the envelope like it was cursed. Her voicemail was unhinged. You spiteful little man. This is war. Sheila tried playing victim, delivering a tearful speech at the library's open mic about greedy land barons. I followed with a limerick. A Sheila who lied through her teeth, tried stealing my home with no glue. Her room was a sham. Her mortgage a jam. Now she's Googling rent with relief. Colonel War. Sheila stormed out. I hosted a garage sale, selling HOA complaint-free pine cones and Serenity paddle lightly used. Neighbors flocked, and I'm buying a chick known to accidentally rob at Sheila's mailbox. As the 30-day deadline loomed, Sheila showed up with a lemon cake and a forced smile, suggesting we discuss refinance. I wanted to take back. They tried to steal my home with cat signatures and held a barbecue in my yard. I'm foreclosing. Her smile faltered. The clock ticked. Deputy Larson served her foreclosure notice in her driveway. Her world's best HOA president, Nog trembled in her hand.
If you're currently using or planning to use any of these companies, and you can see your car listed here, then you should go with this company instead.
Trembled in her hand. Listen to me. I started waiting. Maybe a day for real estate, right? Sheila exploded, accusing me of conspiracy. Larson shut her down, citing her forged documents and a million of criminal charges. Sheila's appeals failed. Her small claims motion, a living bad faith, was dismissed when the judge saw her napkins turn violent. Her Save Our Sanctuary block party drew 6 people, including a confused DJ and her cousins. A viral video of her sobbing in a lawn chair, tripping over cords, became neighborhood lore. When the county clerk uncovered more fraud-altered signatures, backdated votes, and Judge Von Hammer again. Sheila faced felony charges, arguing her actions were spiritually truthful. The investigator wasn't swayed. She got probation, community service, and a 5-year HOA. I bought her house at auction for $183,000 cash, using a proxy so she wouldn't know. She passed, furious, unaware I'd won. Her final act? Breaking into the House Now, a non-profit hub for HOA victims, ringing the Montgomery Center for Property, writes leaving fake notices about shrub noncompliance. Cameras caught her, hoodie and all, when she was arrested outside a craft store with a bag of violator stickers. The center's opening drew crowds, with a plaque dedicated to Sheila's lessons in community failure. Her former allies vanished, who selling their homes. Sheila watched from across the street, a ghost of her former rank, then slunk away. My porch became my victory perch, coffee in hand, as laughter from the center's potlucks echoed. Sheila tried to steal my home with glitter and lies. I bought her bank, turned her palace into a beacon of justice and watched her legacy become the neighborhood punchline. Sometimes